I'm Larry O'Connor alongside Brian Wilson.
Joining us now on the line is Jim Carafano from the Heritage Foundation. He's a military expert, defense expert, intelligence expert. Going to talk to him about what's going on right now in Iraq. Jim, the situation, oh my gosh, it just seems to be completely devolving there. And I am told by the reliable sources that the problem for U.S. military and the idea of airstrikes is we can't tell who are the good guys and who are the bad guys.
Yeah, that's typically the problems in these situations. For me, what's really disturbing is hearing what's coming on from this end of the White House.
Yeah.
First of all, I said that the president's meeting to discuss options on this. This, much like the Ukraine, was an incredibly predictable crisis that people have been warning was coming for months. And the fact that the administration didn't have a plan B in the drawer that says if the worst happens here, here's what we're going to do, that literally is completely unacceptable.
Well, now, I've always been told that over at the Pentagon, they got a contingency plan for everything. So there must have been a plan that says to me that the White House wasn't willing to focus on it, wasn't willing to consider a plan.
Well, we don't know if that's true or not. I mean, the military does do lots of planning. Sometimes they're specifically told not to do things. Sometimes, even if they do a plan, in absence of a larger political military strategy, it really doesn't mean very much. So we don't know. But the fact that the White House wasn't prepared for this literally is completely and utterly inexcusable. The second thing is when you hear coming out of the box, and their two big ideas are, the first one is, well, we'll work with Iran. Well, the United States and Iran have a common interest in Iraq, like a bank teller and a bank robber have a common interest in a bank. I mean, look, this is nuts to think that the great evil that has caused much of the problem in the Middle East, we have these twin evils, the rise of Islamist radicalism, but the government in Iran is equally, and that's an incredibly bad idea.
Yeah.
No.
Well, I was going to say,
and then you mentioned. Well, I mean, it was you mentioned the other really bad idea was, well, let's just throw some military at it, because people forget that this president's actually famous for that. He actually does that a lot. He's actually, in some ways, done it more than Bush. I mean, he was had more casualties in Afghanistan than Bush. He's had more covert operations. He tried to, he started a war in Libya. He tried to bomb his way into Syria. This president's not averse to using military force, but using military force that's practical, suitable, and acceptable for more than just a demonstration project, he doesn't have a very good track record for that.
James Carafano, if you were in the room, if the president picked up the phone and said, listen, I'm not happy with Susan Rice doesn't know what she's doing, Chuck Hagel doesn't know what he's doing, John Kerry, don't get me started. Carafano, I've been reading your stuff. I know you've got a good handle on this. Jim, give me some advice. What should I do in Iraq? What do you tell the president?
Well, I think the task is actually pretty easy. I mean, it's just like triaging, a car accident on the highway. The first thing you want to do is stabilize the situation. And so what do you have to do to keep things from spinning out of control and getting much worse here? Well, you got to keep the Kurds in the fight, because we have the Kurds, Sunnis, and Shias, the three ethnic groups. The Kurds are very pro-Western. They're very good people. They're very tough fighters. You've got to keep them in the fight. You've got to keep the government from falling. So you have to do things to keep the government from falling. You can't cut a deal with Iran, because that's just going to make the problem worse in the long term. And then you've got to really focus on stabilizing Jordan, because it's a very important, small, strategic country. But you really don't want Jordan to fall. And then you really have to be working with with Turkey, which is the major power in the region, in which the U.S. can do some kind of cooperation. So those are the tasks the president should lay out, and then his military and political people will come back and should say, this is the best way to accomplish this. Instead, we have Secretary Kerry out there just throwing out wacky ideas. Much like, he's come like, John McCain's doppelganger.
Well, and let me ask you something, because it sounds like what you laid out there has some major diplomatic efforts, and you got to get a lot of countries involved in this. When, if you're Turkey and you see Secretary of State John Kerry entertaining the idea of bringing Iran into the mix, what signal does that send to Turkey, considering they don't have the best relationship? Well,
it just complicates the problem, because Turkey is also looking at Syria. And what this almost ensures, if ISIS or ISIS, however you pronounce it, if these guys stay in the fight and they keep fighting, then Turkey has the twin evil. They've got Iran on one side, and virtually the Syrian civil war will keep on forever on the other. So there's not a good outcome in here for Turkey if either Iran or ISIS win, or if they both stay in the fight. So Turkey has a vested interest in working with the United States, not just in stabilizing Iraq, but in eventually coming to a solution in Syria that adds to their security. So we ought to be working together. We have common interests and we have common resources that we can bring to the problem.
Our guest is James Carafano with the Heritage Foundation. Okay, look, so I'm looking at what the president is doing right now, sending a limited number of people in to secure the embassy. And nobody disagrees that we want to keep our embassy personnel safe. But it seems to me that what we have here is a desire to not have another Benghazi, and not necessarily taking a bigger picture about what's in the national security interest of the United States in this case. The thing that comes to me, tell me if I'm right or if I'm wrong, the thing that we don't want is the country in controlled by jihadists who have oil money to supply whatever they want to do.
Yeah, well,
how do we stop that?
Well, I think that the tasks that I outlined are step one, which is to stabilize the situation. I don't think these guys are sustainable if they don't have a logistical support. Many of these things, they have taken land simply because people have run away. So I don't think these guys are 10 feet tall. I think they're gonna. I don't think they have the capacity to take Baghdad. I mean, I think the Shias maybe have the capacity to give it away, but these guys don't have the capacity to take it. So these guys can't sustain themselves in the field over time. So you got to kind of take a deep breath. But everything you hear coming out of the administration is kind of a lot like, just pretending like we're doing something.
Let me ask you this. Paul Bremer was on CNN last night, and Aaron Burnett was pretty hard on him and ultimately asked him this question. He said, aren't you the ones who got us into this mess in the first place? Who are you to give us advice now? And what do you say to people who say, oh, here comes Carafano, here comes Heritage, here comes all those neocons. They're the ones who got us into Iraq in the first place. They have no business commenting on this now.
Well, first of all, I had nothing to do with the decision to go into Iraq or any of that stuff, and I've been in the think tank forever. So listen, but the point is there are no do-overs in history, and you can't look back. I mean, we could spend a lifetime arguing who's responsible here. I mean, the president owned this problem for 6 years. When the president withdrew the troops from Iraq, he not only said Iraq was fixable, he said it was fixed. Joe Biden said this was the greatest accomplishment of their administration. So in the president's own words, and in this administration's own pronouncements, they said they had solved this problem. They said that. And we could argue lots of, back and forth about that. But you know what? It's not really relevant. All that matters is going forward. And the one thing that both the administration and conservatives agree on is losing Iraq is not a good idea. And so what we ought to be focusing on is the way forward. But the way forward is not to pretend you're doing something and to be able to, shrug your shoulders and say it's not my fault.
All right, Jim Carafano, thank you so much. We appreciate it.